I'd like to start by inviting you to picture this. 3 short moments, and you may close your eyes if you like. You walk into a room full of strangers. You arrive in a place where you don't quite understand the customs or the language. You say your name, but nobody knows who you are or where you've come from. You can open your eyes. We've all had that experience, whether by our own choice or by circumstance, of arriving in a new place in unknown territory where we don't quite understand where we are, and we're also pretty sure that it doesn't quite understand us. Arriving in a new town can be an exhilarating, exciting, and also sometimes daunting experience. When I first arrived in this region around 2.5 years ago, I was excited by the opportunities of discovering, exploring a new place, meeting new people, having new experiences, and also bringing my experience to that place. I was welcomed by many, and I began to feel that in time I might become a part of this place, and it a part of me. I was curious, and I learnt a lot quickly. I learnt very quickly that Maldon is a place which is extremely proud of its heritage, in particular its gold rush heritage, and in particular its intact streetscape and buildings that date back to the mid-19th century. But it was also a place of great creativity and expressiveness, writers, artists, musicians, and amazing events, and here we are standing in one of them. If you don't know the world of Maldon events, spend a few more weekends here, because there's hardly anyone where there's not an amazing event, from the very traditional to the innovative. It's a place where people care for each other in many small ways as well as greater ways. And it's a place where this community is ridiculously active. I was told when I arrived that the town had about 90 community groups. For a place where you've got slightly over 1,600 population, 90? But it might be a complete myth. I haven't tested it, but I've been told that by more than one person, and I'm beginning to believe it. It's also a place where the environment is quite special. It's a place with magnificent bird life, the delightful wallabies and kangaroos, which mostly are loved. And it's a place where there's people, individuals and groups who are working hard to restore and to revegetate after the ravages of the gold rush period. It's a town that nestles at the base of Mount Tarrangower in Jarrah, big rough mountain. It creates a special atmosphere. There were surprises as well in what I learned. And one of those surprises was the question I found myself so often fielding in those first few months as I met new people. It's a question that arises from natural curiosity, but can also draw a line between me and you, between neighbours, between dog walkers, between any group, in a community where nearly everyone knows nearly everyone else, except for that unfamiliar face. Are you local? It can be a difficult question to answer. For those of us who were born in one place, grew up in another, perhaps moved around as adults, we might be much more used to the conversation starter, such as, where do you come from? Or what do you do? Or who do you know? Or even, what do you think? But are you local? When I first came to this town, I'd been living and working in the region for a while. My partner and I bought a house here. We began to get to know people. We made friends, became involved in the community in various ways. We shopped here, we had lots of coffees here. I thought that was being local. I can hear a few locals laughing. So I was soon put right by some friends who'd been here for much longer than I had, and I began to understand that being local meant that your grandparents, or preferably your great-grandparents, were buried in the local cemetery. That your parents were born here, they went to school here, they worked here, that you were born here, you went to school here, you worked here, and perhaps you were likely to spend the rest of your life here. And these are all important things, and they are all a part of the fabric of a place, as much as that environment is. But at the same time, what does that mean for the many locals who will never reach that lofty aspiration and that criteria? I began to get used to the question. I mean, there wasn't much choice, really. It was going to come at me. So I prepared my answer, and I thought it was reasonably authentic, but also took stock of the context of the question. If I might say, perhaps, well, I guess I'm a new local. Or if I thought the person was interested in the ideas of local, I might also say, well, it depends on what you mean by local. And it would sometimes lead to really interesting and valuable conversations. After I'd been here for perhaps 6 months or so, I began to find my own new locals. And by that I mean places that I thought were fantastic, that I felt comfortable, that I met people, that I had experiences that meant something to me, and perhaps where I could exchange something as well. And one of those places was, and I'll see a few nods I'm sure in a moment, our very own Maldon Bakery. Now, Maldon Bakery is one of those local businesses which seems to manage to straddle the sense of heritage, but also bringing fresh life, fresh imagination, in a way that nourishes the whole community. Maldon Bakery, with its 1854 red brick Scotch wood-fired oven, restored, where you can see a glimpse into that bakery, and you can get a sense, a little notion of what this place might have been like. So it recognises and celebrates that heritage, but at the same time brings a new model, a new way of doing business. You can buy a chunky beef pie, and you can also buy artisanal sourdough deliciousness, which would rival any inner city bakery. And the Maldon Bakery is nearly always full of locals of all descriptions. So I found myself in the queue one day, and it was a long queue that particular day. The kind of queue where inevitably you're going to stand and ask your fellow queue member a question, because you've got to make conversation or do something while you're waiting. So instead of waiting on this occasion for a question to come to me, that question, I found myself turning to the couple behind me and saying to them, "Are you local?" Embarrassment. I mean, how could I? How presumptuous of me. And I apologised and laughed to them awkwardly and said, "Look, I'm terribly sorry. I put you on the spot. I don't know you, and I'm asking you to justify yourself geographically." We had a really nice chat, and I was able to help them with a few pointers of where they might like to go in the town, and I was right. I had got to know that look of, eager, openness about don't quite understand this place. It was fine, but it did get me thinking about the questions that we ask and what we think about local and non-local. It got me thinking about what difference it might make if we extended the definition of local to mean anyone who appreciates, cares for and welcomes others to a place, who looks for the opportunity for outside perspectives to keep a place alive. in the way that any living thing relies on fresh air, water and food from the outside to nourish, sustain and grow the inside. What difference would it make if simply having lived in a place for a certain amount of time was not the only way of being local? If we truly championed a local economy and community, serving the interests of all people in a place at any one time, whether they've been there for 2 hours, 2 decades, 2 generations, or even perhaps for 60,000 years. Is it possible that someone could be a local and a visitor at the same time? By respecting and contributing to local environment, heritage and culture, and at the same time by staying fresh, open and curious in the way that visitors are. So in closing, I'd like you to imagine for a moment that you are in your place. You see a stranger and you think that stranger might like to become a part of your place. What question might you ask them that indicates a sense of respect, curiosity, generosity and inclusion? Under your seats, at least in the first few rows, apologies to the back rows, you will find a post-it note and a pen, and I'd like to invite you just to write down quickly what question you might ask that stranger. We've got a couple of volunteers, I think, who might gather some of those post-it notes up, and just if you could bring them forward to me and I'll read out just a couple. So what's that question? And if you're in the back rows, apologies that I didn't have enough post-it notes, but share it with your neighbour what that question might be. Have we got a few sample questions? I should say all questions are equally valid. There is no right or wrong. Thank you very much. Oh, this is fun. This is fun. Okay, are we ready? Okay, I'm just going to randomly pick a few. Here we are. Are you from this world? Great. You're local. Are you having a beautiful day? What are you interested in? And what is your favourite food? How are you going? Are you feeling connected to this place? In exploring new questions, we can find ourselves putting our arms around a whole host of histories and finding that there can be meeting places for us all, and the chance to not only celebrate a particular past, but to also start to build together a new heritage, a future that we can all be a part of. Thank you.